think we're good to go, yeah?
Good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's great to be back at the in-person venue from Building the Future after 2 years. Welcome to the Customer Experience track, where today in this session we'll be reimagining the citizen experience. My name is Rodrigo Umbelino. I work as a sales executive at Microsoft. With me today, two stellar guests. So all the way from the UK, Sebastian Reeve, Strategy Director at Nuance, and Pedro Costa, CIO at the National Institute of Legal Medicine and Forensic Sciences. And I think I did a very good job with the translation there. So, I think just for the audience to get to know a little bit more background on your organizations as well. Sebastian, I will start with you. What is Nuance? What's its mission, and what's your role at the company?
Okay, well, boa tarde everyone. Great to be here in person as well. So Sebastian Reeve, I work as Strategy Director, as you said, at Nuance. I'm about 20 years in customer service technology, so a little over 20 years. Actually, I worked with Microsoft Technologies way back then. I saw, actually last year, .NET had its 20th anniversary, and I remember when it was launched, so I was having a little bit of a memory lane around that. But yeah, really, Nuance's mission is to help organizations and brands, both commercial and government, as well as healthcare providers, to take friction out of the process for users who are trying to interact with that organization. And we strongly believe that technologies like machine learning and AI can really serve to help that mission in terms of reducing that friction. And when you do that and you do it really well, then you tend to get really interesting business benefits like taking cost or increasing revenue if you're more of a revenue-oriented organization, for example.
Right. And I mean, from your perspective, there was recently announced, there was a recent acquisition of Nuance by Microsoft. In your opinion, what is the impact that this partnership can have, not only in terms of product, but also the customer experience as well?
Yeah, a great question. I mean, it's obviously very exciting for us. We're sort of 8-9 months since post-acquisition now into Microsoft. So yeah, I think as I said, from a Nuance perspective, we're bringing the kinds of technologies that are well proven in different industries to solve these kinds of customer challenges. So really two different areas to that. I think we talk about the technology quite a lot, so things like speech recognition and language understanding and maybe biometrics for authentication or fraud detection. So those kinds of technologies form part of our solution set. But actually, really, our ethos and our mindset is not to sort of lead with the technology side. And I kind of think there's three ingredients to what we bring. So if we think from the user perspective a lot more, it's really kind of more about design. So how should we design an experience that a user's going to use? And that's really kind of more of a consultative process, right? Yeah. So we bring a consulting expertise into Microsoft to think about designing from the user perspective these kinds of conversational experiences. The second ingredient is really data. Right. So ensuring that we're actually two kinds of data. There's the sort of data for learning and improving over time. So the conversations of today become the data of tomorrow and the improvement thereafter, right? It's perfectly suited to agile. But also data about the users, about the citizens, about the customers, and how we can use that data to personalize the experience. So if you think conversationally, if you know something about each other, I don't need to ask questions, right? So the conversation gets shorter because we don't need that context. Right. So that's personalization, right? And it makes a frictionless experience to the user to use that data. And then, of course, there's bringing the technology in. So really, within the Microsoft universe, this is fitting into business applications for customer care, for that sort of citizen or customer experience. But also, we have a similar technology set that we've brought into healthcare. So that's really into the healthcare industry cloud and thinking about how we can help not only patients get access for making appointments and those kinds of more customer experiences, but also helping providers, so doctors and radiologists, with more conversational experiences or more data-driven experiences to really take the friction out of those processes and the way they work every day.
And I think that's an excellent segue because you mentioned a more consultative approach in terms of conversational AI, as well as some industry focus both in customer care as a whole, but public sector and healthcare industries as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very nice segue because Pedro is having a similar approach to the National Institute of Legal Medicine as well. Neste caso, para quem não tenha tão presente, Pedro, se calhar conseguiria explicar um bocadinho o que é o Instituto Nacional de Medicina Legal e Ciências Forenses, ok? E qual é que é o seu papel e o impacto que tem na administração pública.
Sim, com certeza. Antes de mais, muito obrigado pelo convite e pela oportunidade de apresentar aqui o trabalho que o Instituto tem feito neste contexto de transformação digital. O Instituto Nacional de Medicina Legal e Ciências Forenses tem mais de um século de história. Portanto, em 1918 temos os 3 institutos de medicina legal, no Porto, Coimbra e Lisboa, que em 2001 se transformam num instituto único através da sua fusão. As atividades são similares, foram evoluindo com o tempo, naturalmente, e as atividades que nós temos é na área da patologia forense, muito conhecido do público pela questão das autópsias médico-legais, mas, de facto, o maior número de perícias que nós temos é na área clínica forense. Associado ao Instituto temos atividades dos laboratórios forenses, na área da toxicologia, da genética, biologia, virologia, enfim, todo um conjunto de áreas que interagem de uma forma muito crítica com a clínica, com a patologia, produzindo dessa forma um resultado que é utilizado no contexto judiciário, no contexto judicial, auxiliando a justiça, que é no fundo o grande propósito do Instituto, que tem as suas 3 delegações e cerca de 30 gabinetes médico-legais, portanto está representado em Portugal de norte a sul e tem um grande impacto na vida dos cidadãos.
Certo. E eu acho que é particularmente interessante a natureza do Instituto, because the National Institute of Legal Medicine is actually the perfect blend between 2 industries of focus from Nuance's side as well. It's a fusion between what is a public sector entity within the broader Ministry of Justice as well here in Portugal, but with a really strong focus because of its daily activities in a healthcare vertical as well. So I think Sebastian will be really great for the audience to know as well. From your experience, can you share with us some use cases, some references, because I know that Nuance has a lot of work in applying their core technologies of conversational AI, digital contact centers that really empowered public sector and healthcare customers, and what kind of benefits that these industries can have by adopting these technologies as well.
Yeah, great. I would let me take that in sort of two areas, I guess. There's a lot to unpack there. So healthcare first. Let me give you a solution and then a case study. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So in healthcare, I think a really great solution that gets a lot of interest in the market today for the providers of healthcare solutions. So doctors talking to patients in the surgery, for example. We have a solution called Dragon Ambient Experience, or DAX. And DAX is kind of an example, and we heard this morning actually sort of the future of cloud session, talking about those kinds of blending of physical and digital experiences. So DAX really exists as an ambient AI technology, and what I mean by that is it's in the room. You're not talking to it, it's listening to the doctor and the patient in the room having a consultation. And what it's doing is it's unpacking what they're saying with speech recognition. It's unpacking which person is talking, so it kind of knows whether it's the doctor or the patient. And it's then applying language understanding, like specifically clinical language understanding, to understand, well, what is being discussed? What's the symptoms that the patient's expressing? What did the doctor prescribe? But then during the consultation, the doctor can talk to the DAX solution as well, and ask it for advice. Like, what did we say in the last meeting? Can you give me the notes? And bring that up. And really obviously that sounds very Star Trek or futuristic, right, as an experience, but if you think about it in human terms, what happens today without those kinds of solutions is the doctor is sitting behind a screen. And it's a very disconnected experience socially for the 2 people involved, right, to what is a very, very personal consultation or meeting. And so what happens now is, of course, there's no screen anymore, or we minimize the need for that by using this ambient technology, so the doctor's actually really spending their complete focus on the patient. They're not having to take notes during the session and look at note-taking or the screen. And of course, then after the session, there's a huge time saving for the doctor, because what's happening from the DAX solution is it's actually then generating and summarizing that session and saving that into the patient record system.
Right.
Not automatically, but then the doctor just needs to review, right?
Okay,
So it takes a huge amount of time away from the healthcare provider, so they can focus on the patient, and you can actually have more appointments and deal with more people.
And on that note, just a follow-up question. Do you feel that the adoption of such technology in healthcare, regarding the use case that you just given, is it well received, or is it because of the consultative process that Nuance brings to the table, and it employs over the years with its success studies, that it gets easier for the customer in those specific industries to adopt a technology that can be potentially very disruptive to their day-to-day activities, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is an iterative process. We don't get from zero to Star Trek or DAX in one day, right? I mean, so if you think about what doctors have been doing for years in many surgeries, is they've been using a dictaphone, right? A tape recorder in the early days, and then that became digital. And so they were recording their notes after the session, not during the session, but after the session, rather than typing.
Right.
I mean, so doctors don't use a PC for a living, right? So they're actually better at using their voice. So all of these things incrementally save them time to then incrementally getting to the point where there's an ambient technology. So for many of them, that's not a one big leap.
Okay.
So actually what they find is having to dictate after the session is, again, easier than taking notes by hand.
Right.
But then DAX basically takes that one step forward, so they see that increment of improvement, and now it's like I do less additional work.
Yeah.
So I think that increment's important, but I mean, obviously we're not launching these things without doing extensive studies in terms of feedback from each individual healthcare provider that we sell to, engaging their reaction and improving over time. I mean, it's an agile process for us, as I said earlier, in terms of design and iteration and getting it right.
Right.
And understanding new language and things they
Makes
say
sense.
today that they didn't say before, right? So all of it's changing over time.
Okay, great. I mean, and I think you just gave like a really solid example of breakthrough technology disrupting one of the dearest industries that maybe touches the life of every citizen, and it touches, right? And I know that Pedro is also doing a very hard work of really looking at the Institute and the way of that it can digitally transform and evolve into a more modern way of operating. So I would ask you this, Pedro, o Instituto tem de facto feito percurso de transformação digital notável, alguma dela que inclusive temos trabalhado conjuntamente. Quais são as áreas de foco que tu tens para o Instituto, ok? Para inovar na maneira não só como interage com o cidadão, mas também na forma como opera com os seus processos internos, neste caso.
Sim, as áreas de foco acabam por ser áreas muito óbvias e muito clássicas, não é? Temos a área de negócio, a área médica, a área forense e temos uma área de suporte. Eu centralizava esta questão tanto numa vertente como na outra naquilo que estávamos a ouvir, ou seja, temos de fazer isto em função do cidadão, em função de quem vai usufruir dos serviços.
Certo.
E de facto temos de retirar o valor, as atividades que não têm valor acrescentado. Quando nós retiramos o ecrã que está no meio do médico e do utente, nós estamos aí no caminho correto. Portanto, as tecnologias que devemos adotar são essas. A Nuance favorece isso, como outras ferramentas que vão surgindo, e de facto é esse o caminho. O caminho da transformação digital tem de ser adequado a cada negócio. No caso da saúde, no caso do Instituto, pela encruzilhada que tem relativamente à saúde e à justiça, mas que tem de facto essas duas valências, de facto é importante ter em consideração que todas as melhorias têm de ser em função de quem vai usufruir do nosso trabalho. E nesse aspecto eu acho que temos aqui um caminho bem definido, que faz com que se tente fazer as coisas bem à primeira, mas fazer uma vez, com melhor eficiência e garantindo na mesma sempre, isso é inquestionável, a questão da qualidade do trabalho prestado.
Certo. E na tua experiência, e isto é quase um consenso, e não querendo entrar aqui em trâmites políticos, há uma grande pressão também para haver uma transformação digital naquilo que é um bocadinho qualquer organismo do setor público a nível nacional. E tendo tu liderado e feito estes esforços com sucesso dentro do Instituto, qual é que seria um bocadinho o teu conselho, a tua recomendação para outros líderes tecnológicos de qualquer organismo do setor público ou na saúde, para conseguir, eventualmente, dependendo do contexto de cada organismo, ou começar a sua jornada de transformação digital ou acelerar a jornada que já tem definida.
Sim, eu acho que tocaste no ponto essencial no fim da pergunta, que é a questão do contexto.
Certo.
Devemos analisar o contexto de cada organização, devemos analisar as expectativas das partes interessadas. O Instituto teve a felicidade de começar esse processo através de um sistema de gestão integrado, pensando já num contexto de qualidade 4.0, pensando já em todos os passos que futuramente podem usufruir de inteligência artificial, de apoio à tomada de decisão. Portanto, temos esta coerência organizacional que nos faculta estarmos numa situação algo confortável quando vemos tudo isto a chegar. A pressão de que falas é uma pressão positiva, não é? É uma pressão que faz com que os serviços tenham de avaliar as oportunidades que surgem e trabalhar para garantir uma coerência relativamente à estratégia de cada organização. No caso do Instituto, temos, antes de mais, uma visão estratégica definida pelo Conselho Diretivo que é coerente com as orientações da tutela, no caso do Ministério da Justiça, e esse contexto é-nos bastante favorável para estarmos a fazer este trabalho num curto espaço de tempo, que de outra forma poderia demorar um pouco mais.
And you mentioned AI, and I think it wouldn't be a Building the Future session without mentioning ChatGPT or OpenAI or GPT-3, something like that. We've seen a lot of talk lately around the evolution and the mainstream use of AI in a more self-service manner to the common citizen, to the normal IT user, let's call it that way. And these technologies like ChatGPT from OpenAI reaching record levels of adoption, as we've seen in entity data yesterday, some massive statistics around adoption for ChatGPT. With this evolution of AI, Sebastian, what do you think, and at the rhythm that technology has been evolving, how do you see conversational AI, digital contact centers, this field of expertise in general, how do you see it in 10 years' time? What would it be, or what do you imagine it to be?
I'm gonna slow the question down a little bit. There's a lot of hype and a lot of expectation out there at the moment, and we're talking about healthcare and we're talking about government services. These are incredibly important services that the public needs to use. AI technology has been used to provide these kinds of experiences and services for a long time. So let me give you another example. We're working for a decade now with the Revenue and Customs Service. This is basically the tax collection agency in the UK, where I'm from. Clearly important. So that's £500 billion of revenue every year to the exchequer of the UK. Okay, we need that money. It's important we get that experience right. So 10 years ago, we were using machine learning to change when you called the Revenue and Customs from a lot of menus and hundreds of different phone numbers, depending on which department, right, to a please tell me how I can help you, conversational kind of system that you could say whatever you needed to, like I have a problem with my tax credits and I need to understand like when the application deadline is. People can say very complicated things. Now the reality of government is its huge complexity, right? I mean, this is not a trivial sector in terms of citizen need. So the tax authority in the UK, for example, that's 1,200 different reasons for contact, and with tax returns, it's very peak demand, right? So basically in January and in July, there's a huge, peak in calls. This is then 450 to maybe 500,000 calls a day to be dealt with. So you need to get these systems working extremely optimally. We're not building demos here, right? So that's really important. And so, the way AI is used in these kinds of environments is, it's highly curated, it's extremely well tested, with a lot of data input, but then a lot of test data and that's iterated over time. So you don't just build the system and walk away. People change what they ask for every day, right? Depending on the time of year and whether it's the tax time or benefits time or whatever else is going on. So I think these new technologies, we're seeing a paradigm shift for sure, right? Because a lot of these AI technologies, it takes work to create these models, to take the data, to curate the answers you want and the models you want to create. And GPT and other technologies offer this paradigm shift where a lot of the work is done beforehand, right? You take a huge amount of data and you create these very, at massive scale with a lot of cloud compute, and you create these very large models. So then when you're actually applying it to a specific task, you don't need to do that work as much again. Which is very, very tempting, but I also have to kind of sit on the other side of using these technologies, which is, Microsoft take a very strong stance in responsible AI, and the fact that a generative model like GPT can say things that you didn't intend, right? I mean, these very large language models. And so in a very formal industry like government or in healthcare,
particularly, I was
really
going to add that, particularly in those sensitive industries like healthcare and government, for sure. Yeah.
Exactly, we have to be extremely careful. So I think, to be honest, to be a little bit more pragmatic, there's a huge amount of upside in these kinds of models to manage, what you might call the long tail of demand, right? The things it's very hard to train for because they don't happen very frequently. And so a model like that may help, but you need to be very responsible and make sure that, that the content is moderated in some way, and that's still work in progress, I would say. To ensure that that's done, but there's still a huge place for curating and creating specialist models for, tax authority or the benefits agency or the Department of Justice, who have very different needs and very different user demand. So I think, there's a place for both. But yeah, we're excited about the potential. I think it's, it has a huge potential to take a lot of the work out of creating these kinds of solutions and maintaining them.
I mean, I think to your point, and that was just challenging, but I agree. I think when we're talking about such breakthrough technology, adoption needs to be balanced and needs to be tested, because otherwise we can try to just step in for technology's sake without,
I hate to be the boring one.
I mean,
right? It's important.
But I agree with you, and I think because I wanted to close this panel as well with your perspective, Pedro. To this point and to the rhythm and with the testimonial that Sebastian just gave us about what would be the future of this area in 10 years, with the evolution of technology as well, how do you see, for example, the National Institute of Legal Medicine operating their internal processes by adopting and continuing on their digital transformation journey in 10 years, for example?
Rodrigo, foi pouco aquilo que eu disse que está muito coerente com aquilo que o Sebastian disse, ou seja, por lado nós pretendemos ter dados estruturados, ter sistema sólido, com uma boa reengenharia de processos que represente a atividade de cada uma das áreas. Perspectivando isso, estamos à espera de ter estas soluções de otimização de trabalho. A inteligência artificial naturalmente surge como algo que é incontornável, no entanto é uma área extremamente sensível, portanto a ponderação que o Sebastian defende através da Nuance é aquilo que nós também defendemos. Claro. Ou seja, tem de haver aqui eu há pouco dizia que aqui o grande objetivo é ter uma tomada de decisão com um bom suporte, mas temos que ter tomada de decisão, isso é um requisito obrigatório na nossa perspectiva. Portanto, daqui a 10 anos eu acho que vai depender muito da maturidade que a inteligência artificial vai ter e outras tecnologias. Até lá eu acho que temos uma preocupação mais forte, que é ter dados com qualidade, que será essencial para depois dar esses passos de forma sustentada.
Claro. I think this was the perfect note to end our debate, our session. First and foremost, gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for everyone that was watching in the audience and at home. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Obrigado.